Section 15.2, types of seventh chords. To succeed in this section, you'll want to recall how to construct each of the 4 types of triads, and you'll also want to remember that a minor third, which we dealt with quite a bit when we were relating major keys to minor keys, a minor third encompasses 3 letters and contains 3 half steps, whereas a major third, which is a little bit bigger, also encompasses 3 letters, but it contains 4 half steps. So those bits of information will be very valuable in this section. Now, there are 5 common types of seventh chords to know, and in order from smallest to largest, they are fully diminished, half diminished, minor, dominant, and major. Now, let's take a look at that list. It should make a decent amount of intuitive sense. We're used to having things with the word diminished in them be small. We're used to having things that are called minor be smaller than major. And now we've got this new dominant idea in the mix, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So from left to right, fully diminished, half diminished, minor, dominant, and major. You definitely want to remember that sequence. One little bit of clarification here. Fully diminished should make sense as being the smallest one. It's been diminished all the way, so it's the smallest of the 5, and then half diminished comes after in this list. It's not been diminished all the way, it's just a little bit diminished. So again, fully diminished, half diminished, minor, dominant, and major. You want to memorize those as soon as possible. Now, we're going to construct over here to the left just a hypothetical seventh chord without a staff or anything, but we know that seventh chords look something like this. It's just a series of stacked thirds. But the way we're going to be thinking about these seventh chords is as follows. We're going to think of each seventh chord as having a triad on the bottom. Remember that seventh chords are just like triads, except for they have one note added on top. So this is what we're going to be calling the bottom triad. Those 3 notes together. And then on top, I just refer to this in the chart as the top interval. That is, from the 5th of the 7th to the chord, there is some kind of interval. Now, what are the possibilities for each of these items? On the bottom, your triad types that are possible are major, minor, and diminished. Augmented is actually not possible, at least in this list. What are the options for the top interval? Well, they're going to be thirds, right? Seventh chords are nothing more than a series of stacked thirds. So the interval is always going to be a third, and it's either going to be a major third or minor third. So in order to construct these seventh chords, you're going to take some kind of bottom triad and combine it with one of these top intervals, and that will make, in nearly every case, one of the chords on our list. So here is our chart, and this should be self-explanatory to a degree. In the first column, we have the different types in order from smallest to largest. And in the next column, we have the bottom triad. So what are the bottom 3 notes? What do they add up to in terms of a triad? And then we have the top interval in the final column. So whether it's a minor third with a lowercase m or a major third with a capital M. So you need to memorize this chart, and I'm going to give you a bunch of tips for doing so. It's actually not that complicated once you know a few of the quirks here. So I'm going to go through these bullet points here because they're quite useful. So all of the types of seventh chords with a triad word in their name, like fully diminished, half diminished, minor, and major, those are all triad words, right? They have those triads on the bottom. So for instance, fully diminished has a diminished triad on the bottom. Half diminished has a diminished triad on the bottom. A minor seventh chord has a minor triad on the bottom, and a major seventh chord has a major triad on the bottom. So easy enough. Now, as we mentioned when we were talking about the list, half diminished chords are larger than fully diminished chords, and we talked about how their wording reflects that. And even though both of them have a diminished triad on the bottom, the larger one, the half diminished, has a major third on top, whereas the smaller one has the smaller kind of third on the top. All right, so that's also pretty easy. Next up, dealing with the major and minor seventh chords. Not only does the bottom triad match the name of the overall seventh chord, but so does the top interval. So think of it this way. A minor seventh chord is equal to a minor triad plus a minor third. So in other words, minor plus minor gives you minor. Similarly, with the major seventh chord, a major seventh chord is a major triad on the bottom plus a major third on top. So major plus major gives you major. So both components match. And now the one holdout, you just have to remember that the dominant seventh chord has a mismatch, and it begins with a major triad on the bottom, and it has the opposite kind of thing on the top, a minor third. So once again, a dominant seventh chord, major triad on the bottom, plus minor third on top. And you'll want to practice these by just reciting, for instance, minor seventh chord equals minor triad plus minor third, or fully diminished seventh chord equals diminished triad plus minor third. So spend a moment and memorize that chart, given those little tricks at the bottom. Now, I'll go on to the next page. I'll demonstrate this exercise. You can do this on your own without any input from me, but I'll just continue through it so that you've got the answers to check. So from memory, list the 5 types of seventh chords in order from smallest to largest. So we're going to start off with that fully diminished, and I'm just going to write that. I won't fill it with, or I won't complete it with seventh chord. So fully diminished, seventh chord. Half diminished, because it's not quite all the way diminished. Then minor. Then dominant, our new word, which will become very important if you continue in the theory classes. And major. So that's the list from smallest to largest. Now in this chart, we're just filling in the blanks. So I've mixed up the seventh chords a little bit, but you still have to complete the bottom triad and the top interval. Let's start with the first one, the major seventh chord. That's one of those ones where both components match, right? So the bottom triad is, I'll just say, I'll write it out in words here, major triad. And the top interval, again, it's going to match. It's going to be a major third, so capital M3. Dominant, this is the one with the mismatch, right? It begins with a major triad, and maybe I don't even have to write the word major, but so be it. And the top interval is going to be opposite of that, so it's a minor third on top. I'll abbreviate these now. The minor seventh chord, well, that's another one that has both components matching, so it's a minor triad and a minor third on top, so minor plus minor equals minor. Half diminished, well, diminished is in the name, so you're going to have a diminished triad, which I'll abbreviate like that, on the bottom. And on the top, though, since it's half diminished, it's not as small as possible. It's going to have the larger interval on top, so that's the major third. And then finally, fully diminished, well, that's definitely going to have diminished on the bottom. And since it is fully diminished, it's as small as possible. It will get the smaller of the two options on top.